Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host, and I'm glad to have you back. If you wouldn't mind doing so, if you haven't already done so, is please subscribe to the podcast. It's on 30 different channels, including Apple, the biggie, but you pick the one you like, okay? And while you're out there, stay on the internet, go to globalinvestoragent.com. This is where we showcase all the investor-friendly agents around the country. We know them because we trained them, right? And they're in 36 states, a couple of Canadian provinces, and they're not typical agents, guys. They know how to identify, track, negotiate, analyze on and off market deals for you and I, the investor, okay? So it's kind of a big deal. And if you are an agent, man, this is go visit the site, and there's a place you can put in your name and email, and you can actually talk to me. This may be something you want to add to your model going forward. The way the business is going, it's not time to panic, it's time to prepare. And this is a surefire way to do it, man. So we just happen to be at the right place at the right time. So take advantage of it. Hey, by the way, we got a great guest today, Johnny Wolff, all the way from the West Coast, going to talk to us about this program called HomeRoom and what used to be we would call house hacking. I guess we still call it that, but it's more evolved than that now, guys. You got to pay attention. This is a great opportunity for you to invest in a way, either directly or have it done for you turnkey. So so Johnny, first off, man, I just want to say thank you for taking your time to do this. You got an excellent platform, and I can't wait for these guys to see what you got. So thanks for being here,
Hey, Gary, thanks for having me, man. Massive Passive Cash Flow. Such a good name for a podcast. And I think the concept of investor-focused agents is so crucial because there's such a difference in the approach and the understanding. And a lot of the best investor agents, they know they've invested themselves. They have that experience, or they've helped a lot of people buy, and that experience is really, really important. To who you're going to pick to help you buy an investment property. If you buy with the normal agent, they're going to say they can do it and they're going to try their best, but it's not the same thing. So
it's a different terminology, different methodology, and it's a different ballgame. And when I built my brokerage years ago, we told people you have to have two hats. One is your traditional agent hat, the other one is for investors. Different motivations, it's a different, we literally have a completely different platform just for investors. But I built it because I am an investor, and it's over $1 million in development costs, not including, the man hours. I'm just talking dollars. You're looking at 8 years in development, and boy, it's a blessing. I mean, the numbers. Well, I'll just tell you, our guys outproduce the average. If you look at NAR's average, we outproduce the average agent to agent by more than 2 to 1. And it's not because I'm a genius. It's because the agents know how to work with investors, and the investors bring in multiple transactions. That's the key. So let's enough about me, man. Let's talk about you and what you got going on there. So if you would you mind just painting a picture? You got a really interesting background. I want people to hear this. Kind of lead us up to where you are now and how you got there,
Sure. Yeah. So I shortly out of college, I got a job in the Silicon Valley in finance, and I bought my first rental in 2008, which was a year out of school for me. And I didn't really know anything about real estate investing. I got lucky. My partner in Midland, Texas ended up being really good. But I didn't really know how to vet them. But they were great. And so I did fairly well on that first property. And then I started to use my finance background and modeling to look at real estate versus other asset classes. And I found that if I put all my investment into real estate, which I shortly did, I sold all my stocks in Google, and Amazon, which I kind of oh man, that would have been done pretty well too, and invest in real estate, and that did quite well. In 2015, I decided to invest in real estate full time. I'd lived with roommates in the Bay Area for about a decade, about 7 or 8 years before that. So when I moved to Austin after picking it as the market that I thought had the best appreciation potential.
Yep.
And then I started to buy homes and rent them by the room, and did pretty well. between 2015 and 2018, I was able to sell a few of the homes and use that cash to buy more homes. Added some properties in Kansas City, rented them by the room as well. Mm-hmm. And some of my friends started to ask, like, how do we invest like you're investing? It seems like you're getting more rent by renting by the room. It's more consistent. And so I started HomeRoom, which is my it's a software platform. It's sort of like Airbnb for roommates, and enabled investors to add their homes to our platform. So you can buy a home with us and list it, and then get 50% more rent, so that's where I am today.
Well, I love the concept. I mean, you and I were speaking before this. My very first purchase was literally less than a month out of college. Bought it with my college roommate. His name was Socrates. His parents were Greek. His dad was Greek immigrant. His mother was first generation. And when we graduated, we're like, man, we're gonna rent a house down by the beach, because we went to Old Dominion University, right on the water. And his dad said, no, you're not. You're gonna buy a house. You're gonna make money on it. Of course, I was again. I said, sign me up, man. I didn't know what I was doing, but he taught us. It was a crazy deal. But we had a 4-bedroom ranch, just 5 minutes from the ocean. We rented out the other 2 rooms, and those guys' rent pretty much covered our expenses. And we didn't call a house hacking. It was just what we had to do to get the deal done. And that led to a lifetime of investing, because it's an amazing journey. So I appreciate what you're doing, because what's interesting is, over the last several years, it has become very popular. The way the economy is going, the way the market is elevated so much. I mean, pricing and now the cost of borrowing money, the increase in population is just, there's a lot of demand on housing. In fact, there's a shortage of housing. So what you're doing is it's like you're commercializing it, almost like what Airbnb did to empty rooms for vacationers and business travelers and things like that. But you've got a niche, man. It's a fast growing, very healthy, robust niche. So can we talk about maybe a case study, an example? I know you probably can't give names and addresses and things like that, but like most investors start off with a single family home, renting it out or flipping it, just like I did, and then eventually move the duplexes and fourplexes. But if you could draw a comparison between like a traditional rental and what you've learned to do, and then maybe describe that with some, I know, and everybody remember, Johnny and I, neither one of us are attorneys or accountants. So these are just our numbers. Johnny's numbers are my numbers. They may not be your numbers. And they might be numbers for one marketplace and not another. So having made that disclaimer, if you wouldn't mind, Johnny, paint us a good picture of maybe a recent investment or something for a client, perhaps,
And it's a good disclaimer. I think it's really important to always do your homework in investing, like regardless of like how trustworthy the person, how much you like them, how much you like the market, all the positive signals are popping. Still doesn't, it doesn't allow you off the hook for doing your homework and like conservatively underwriting each deal. You got to do it. And so that's really important. This is a property that we like to talk about, is from one that's been on the platform for, I think, 4 years. When we initially, the property was initially renting for $1,550 to a single family. We added to our platform. The investor put in $15,000 to turn. There's like an ancillary, it was like a dining room, but there was 2 dining rooms for some reason. And so we turned one of them into a bedroom, and then we had another space downstairs we were able to add a bedroom. So we turned it from a 4 to a 6 bedroom house. And once it was fully occupied, the total rent was $27.75. So substantial increase. The math on that is pretty bananas. So we don't get that sort of 80% increase in gross rent all the time. We have gotten more before, but we have gotten a lot less as well. So that's sort of what the deal looks like. There is typically some out-of-pocket investment in some sort of construction or conversion. We do everything to code. We get everything inspected by the city, so we make sure that we're above board there. But yeah, that's the way we're looking. That's the typical deal we're trying to do. We say with HomeRoom, you can get 50% more rent for the same house. That's sort of what we're targeting. And it kind of like averages out somewhere in that range. Well,
that's pretty awesome. And if you don't mind, one of the things you and I spoke about beforehand, is the data, how important data is. And you mentioned something I haven't heard before, a term called data science. How does data science play a role in real estate investing, and how are you using it? If you can get a little more specific on that, that'd be awesome,
Yeah, data science is, imagine the guy that that's the best at Excel, and then imagine someone that's like 10 times better than that. That's essentially, and then someone that can do some coding, and so my co-founder Mike, he's former Facebook, Airbnb, Google guy, data scientist. And so the way that him and his team work is they've pulled millions of listings down from Craigslist in different parts of the roommate rent by the room ecosystem, and then they're able to relatively accurately forecast what a room will rent for. But room rentals are notoriously difficult to predict, especially after you've rented the room. It's really easy, but going in, it's a little bit trickier. So that's what our data science team is doing. With it's sort of like AirDNA, but for room rentals, and it's internal to us. So gotcha. That's one of the tough parts, right? With this model is that there's not a tool that you can just go and grab, the rental comp. You have to have some data to make your guesstimation, and that's one thing that HomeRoom will do for our partners.
Okay. Well, now let's say somebody's coming into you and they've locate your online, or maybe they talk to a friend of theirs who's investing, but they haven't invested yet themselves. It's their first property. Whether it comes from the data itself or other sources, what are some of the key things that a first-time investor should be thinking about before doing this?
Yeah, I think I like to think about investors sort of like a financial planner would think about an investor. It depends on your life stage. It depends on your financial circumstances. Some people have, they're looking for passive income purely because they're kind of towards the end of their income producing years, and they're looking to kind of. Other folks are much earlier in their career, and they're trying to generate net worth, right? Because they know if they get net worth, they can turn that into cash flowing assets later. So it really depends on, you got to know what you're looking for. I think that's the biggest one. And we try to pair that investor with the city that matches that need the best. It's like buying a really secure bond if you're kind of like looking for passive income for your retirement, or buying maybe a more aggressive tech stock if you're looking to kind of like generate more wealth. So that's really, I think, the most important thing is not everyone should be pushing hardcore into cash flow in Kansas City. Not everyone should be looking at buying Austin properties. So I think understanding where you are and what your strategy is, short and long term, I think is really important. I think that's the first thing I would say as an investor, if it's your first home, is figure out what you're going to be using this asset for. Real estate's very powerful, but there's different flavors of it.
Yeah. And you mentioned two totally different markets, great markets, Kansas City and Austin. Kansas City is more stable. I don't want to say mundane or boring, but it's stable and predictable. It's a great balanced market, right? And it's very affordable. Whereas Austin has gone, just crazy in the last generation. It's a beautiful place. I have to admit, I've been there many times. You got lakes around there that are fun, and the weather is very, mid-January afternoon, you're probably looking at something like in the high 50s, 60 degrees temperature. You're not going to get that in Kansas City. I can tell you that in January, So, but what about the next person investing who's maybe already invested in? They're looking to level up, from one to many properties, and they want to, looking at maybe like you or I getting a large scale portfolio. What are some of the key factors for that person?
Yeah, a lot of similarities to the first person as well. But I think now with multiple, I think you start to look at it in sort of like a stock portfolio is like in a balanced approach, right? Because if you only have one, it's really important that the one you buy matches exactly what you're looking to produce, either cash yield or net worth increases. But if you're looking at portfolio, now you can actually balance it and tilt it, and you can have a bit more subtlety. And so I think I think building a portfolio that matches, maybe you can do 80% in Kansas City and 20% in Austin now. So that I think is really a cool opportunity if you're doing it like a larger portfolio. I also think that you start to get a lot of the benefits of a multifamily with a portfolio of single family homes. You're able to forecast your repairs much more accurately because it's averaging out more. I think one of the things we'll see with first time investors is when they get a repair, it like really bothers them. And then if you have someone with 20 homes, they just are like, yeah, every month I get repairs, right? And every month I get turnover, and every year I get an eviction or two, right? And so it starts to normalize. And I think that's, with co-living and our type of investing, that's the same exact thing, right? And so you're going to get really nice yields that are going to be above the market. And as you tilt them in different directions by city, you'll get different per returns parameters.
Okay. Hey, I have to ask, because I used to, in addition to a brokerage company, I had a property management company, a title company, an appraisal company. And you mentioned maintenance and repairs. What do you see in the future of property management, and how, what does that mean for investors, or how can investors position themselves, I guess, to benefit with how property management is evolving? Because these new exit strategies, they weren't around, 10, 20 years ago. This is all new, We'll be right back with the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast after I invite you to Monday Night Live. Every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, I teach a class without fail for you on subjects ranging from flipping to buying rentals, managing rentals, wholesaling, commercial, creative purchasing techniques, analyzing properties, identifying properties, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of subjects. And if you are a licensee, if you have a real estate license, you should definitely tap in, because there are a lot of investor agents also in the class. Many of them are on the global investor agent team. So you can learn from them, as well as from me, how to actually work with investors correctly and profitably. All right, we'll see you Monday night. The link is in the show notes. Go ahead and register. We'll get right to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast.
Yeah, I think property management is evolving because of like smart home technology. We're seeing large multi-state property management players. They've been around for a bit. I think Renters Warehouse is one of the first, but we're seeing larger players doing a really nice job. Like Mind is doing a really nice job. I thought Darwin was really doing a nice job. That you're able to manage. It used to be death if you'd have a remote manager, and now it's becoming feasible. Smart. You've got cameras. You've got smart home tech that's like sensing leaks. You've got, in our case, we have video doorbells. We have smart locks. We have so all that sort of means that like the cost basis of property management can come down, right? As things get a bit more centralized, a bit more streamlined, a bit more efficient, with a mixture of kind of overseas teams supporting property managers, which means also remote, and then with the mix of technology. And so all this means is good news for the investor, in my opinion, because you can push towards a higher bar for quality and consistency. And you can also get trusted brands to help you in multiple markets, which I think is really valuable, because one of the challenges I find with single market property managers, which can be really, really great, right? But if you talk to them, their market is what they're going to sell, and that's it, right? Because they only have inventory in a single city. And some of the time you need to kind of like duck and weave and try different markets at different timings. So you really, having a multi-city, multi-metro property manager can give you a little bit of more opportunity and choice in their ecosystem with more expertise across regions.
I love that. I love that analogy. And the fact that you're right. And investors today are not just investing in one market. I mean, we got agents in 36 of the United States and 3 Canadian provinces. And I can tell you, in places like Texas and Arizona and Florida and Georgia and Tennessee, we've got investors from all over, Minnesota, Ontario, Canada, Michigan, Illinois, New York. It's just all over. They're investing in multiple places, and they are looking at some of these newer strategies like what you're describing here. If you wouldn't mind, when it comes to what you're doing, like how do you identify above average returns? I know, so you have some investors you're working with who already have properties, and you're working with others that really want you to find the properties. And we can talk about that more too, but what are some of the tools or strategies or methodologies you use to identify these above average returns?
Yeah, we have an underwriting team, and so our Mike's data science team is feeding, kind of like we're pulling all the properties that come available on and off market into like for the underwriting team to review. And so on a daily basis, they're going in and looking at every home that comes available and saying these few, well, we think, with reasonable certainty are going to outperform. So that's sort of our process. It's for the underwriting team, it's like a lot of work, very repetitive, but it's really, as an investor, that's, kind of what you want. You want a team that has some asset management capabilities. And that's, I think, kind of like to, revisit if you're going from one to many kind of question. I think a company that has asset management thinking, which is like, how do I make properties perform better and optimize the performance, is something that I think is really important as you kind of go upstream and start to build out a portfolio. Because some partners, though, you could have 20 properties and they're just kind of like, they're just going through the motions, which they're usually executing pretty well, but they're not thinking strategically with you. And I think that's a really important piece to have for big investors.
Yeah, I agree. And part of the strategy is obviously timing, but also location. So if we could touch on that, what are some of the areas, if you don't mind sharing, that you're actively looking into invest and based on the data science that you have? I know probably one of them is well, you actually mentioned Texas and Kansas, but what are some of the areas, and is there any commonality between those areas that you're not seeing? Like, so let's say California is not on the list. What is it about California that makes it so that it's not on the list? So kind of a loaded question, but geography is kind of an important thing too,
Yeah, I mean, like when you're looking at if you're evaluating states for investment, I think we think foundationally the way to invest is the economy. You're basically buying a sliver of the economy, because housing is sort of the answer to number of people and their income, and then let's say 30% of that can go to housing. And some of that's going to go to renting a house, and some of that's going to go to owning a house, right? And all of that the basics of those economic calculations are what drives housing prices, with supply and demand mixed in there. So that's one of the biggest ones. We really like to look at economies that are already beginning their ascent. There's places like Detroit that have like kind of been talked about ascending repeatedly, but just kind of haven't really broken out yet. And then there's places that have way broken out and they've had like their time in the sun, and maybe they've kind of reached their potential. California feels like probably the latter to me, where it's like, the big boom in real estate prices. Oh, the other thing about California real estate that's a little bit challenging is it's more volatile. We see coastal real estate prices, just when you look at them compared to Texas or the Midwest or even the South, the Sun Belt and California just seem to be very volatile, which is, it's not a good thing for any asset that you own as an investor to be volatile, right? So that's one of them. There's also, laws about evictions. States like Pennsylvania and California and Oregon. There's others that they just have these. I don't know if I want to say insane. That's too judgmental, but really frustrating eviction laws where you're talking about like 11 months and like, the tenant knows that they can force you to pay them money to leave, and eviction moratoriums might happen just at the state level at any time. So those are states you have to be really, really careful that you're underwriting eviction cost in, because it'll happen at a way higher rate in Pennsylvania than anywhere else. And it'll be way more expensive than anywhere else. Texas, you can evict someone in a few months and the costs are nominal. So that's really freaking important. And you won't think it's important until it is important, and then it'll be really important. Yeah. And so that's another piece of it. So like if you just kind of like, just like heat map it. Like, where can I get the overlay of like economies that are at the beginning of their growth cycle, have great economic fundamentals, jobs, population growth, have reasonable eviction laws. And, that's a really good way to kind of pick a market to start with. I used to Google articles like what's a great real estate market to invest in when I was like younger. And those are fine, but I honestly think that that's not the best way to do anything, because usually those are written by kind of like journalists who like are just,
Right.
they're not doing the research. So I think doing the research on the fundamentals of, I think that's really the key.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there's a website we like to use. It actually uses data from IRS tax filings. You're not getting individual return data, but it's giving you, aggregate numbers in terms of like county level and state level. And I think it's called How Money Walks, if I remember correctly, but it's a great free tool. And you can literally see the migration of investable dollars across state lines and across counties, and gives us a big clue ourselves too. But what about timing? I mean, some people have been calling for a recession now for a couple of years, and I do believe I've been around long enough to know, guys, it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's just when. But what I think tempering this one, for all intents and purposes, we should already be in one when you look at the numbers. But the fact is housing, because of the sheer volume of demand, hasn't cooled yet enough to really cool off the economy, because housing drives everything. I mean, my gosh, you build one house, you're employing how many laborers between electrical, plumbing, roofing, and flooring, and kitchens, and lenders and attorneys and inspectors and appraisers, just a lot that's going on there. But in any case, back to the statement, and I hate to tell people to time it, because really, I've always invested, whether it's up or down market. I just have a different strategies for up markets than I do for down markets. But what's your take on that? It seems like with your strategy, I'm just going to go out on a limb, but I think you could keep on going as long as you have that homeroom type philosophy. Unless things really dramatically change, I think you're always going to have a model that works. But have you guys thought about that timing wise, where we are in the market? Is it going up? Is it going down? And do you have different strategies if it does change?
Yeah, it's definitely, you can feel the capital kind of leaving the ecosystem a little bit, just which is, the Fed is doing on purpose. We could feel interest rates going up and how that affects individual underwriting. So there's certainly, you could definitely feel that the kind of the change in the wind versus, let's say, 18 months ago. I think timing the market can be done, but it can't be done by most people, right? Like, I think, just like timing the stock market probably can be done, but probably by a handful of companies with some really elite analytical horsepower in their shop.
Yeah.
But I think the better way for most people to invest, and I would say that this includes myself, right? Like, even though I have a small data science team and we have 100 million under management, I don't think we're up to the level of quantitative advancedness that we can time the market. So I think for me personally, I continue to buy, right? Yeah. Because you buy you marry the house and you date the interest rate, so you can kind of like, you can refinance out of interest rates. I think as long as you have good cash flow, it sort of hedges against kind of volatility in the prices. And if you buy in more stable markets that already have cash flow today, Kansas City is a great example. If you buy in a cash flowing house in Kansas City today, you're pretty much golden. The tax rates are low enough. That your cash flow will grow over time. And that you've started the journey to getting to where owning that real estate gets really great. Like year 4, 5, 6, things start to turn the corner. You're like, man, this is awesome. Year 1, 2, 3, it seems like traditionally are quite lean. You always are like, find something that you didn't know about. And so it just takes a while, right? So I think if you can find good, solid deals now, I think it's a good time to continue going. I think you do need to be aware that it's a bit more challenging than it was with, I think everyone's aware with interest rates, and prices are fairly inflated in a number of markets still. I think you still have pretty inflated prices in some of the markets that have seen big pullbacks. I think may pull back further. So just be a little cautious of that. Just look at what happens over the last year. If it's staying stable now, I don't know if it's going to come down further, right? Kansas City hasn't really moved. I don't think it's going to move. It never really ran up, right? And so I don't think you're going to get a better deal in Kansas City. Most likely, it's feasible. There's an outside chance something crazy happens and breaks loose with commercial,
Right.
commercial paper out there being a bit, bank issues. All this stuff makes me a little nervous. And who knows how that's all going to play out. I'm not sure if I see a path to the Midwest stable markets coming down like 20%, maybe 5%. And I don't know if it's better to buy 5% cheaper or to buy 5% more expensive with less competition and inspections and time. And so in a way, I would say there's really some nice advantages to buying in this environment versus 18 months ago, where it was like 25 offers, waiving every contingency, having to, people are having to buy in cash and then refinance after. Like, I would rather buy now. Probably not in Phoenix. I'd probably not rather buy in Phoenix now, but I'd definitely rather buy in Kansas City now than I would have 18 months ago. I can refinance that later and it'll work out. Right. So I think it's about the market itself. I think timing the market it's not a good idea for 99.99% of people. And so it's about continuing to work your process and find good deals and work with a good agent.
Yeah. Well, not only that, if you look at your model, if you think about it, you can talk about this if you want to, the future of living. If you look at how Gen Z, will amplify the trends that millennials have already kind of established. I mean, more and more over the last generation, people are rooming together into later in life and, delaying marriages and things like that. But I mean, do you agree, or what's your take on that as far as how demographics and social graphics and human behavior is going to drive your business too, in spite of the economy, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, we're, in terms of rent by the room models, it's getting to it's really maturing as a space, right? We're seeing 20 years of people living with Craigslist roommates turning into this really cool rent by the room industry that I think is going to be a really nice asset class for people that are investing in it. You get more rents, you get more stability, because if you lose a tenant, you still have 4 others paying. We've seen roommates, people between 18 and 35, the percentage of people living with roommates over the last 20 years has more than doubled. And so it's just all these pressures, debt, student debt, increased housing prices, all this stuff is kind of turning into this sort of everyone's living with roommates. Not everyone, it's 26%, but that's a lot of people.
It is.
And so there's a big demand, and people, sometimes you're like, oh, that sounds like a good model for a few people. It's no, it's 26% of all people between 18 and 35. We're talking about tens of millions of people, right? And so, we see this having a lot of legs, and I think it's a future for the pre-marriage stage where people can live like this, save up to buy a place, and get in good financial situations.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, listen to this. I know we're getting close on time here, but can you talk about your platform? How can people participate? I know there's one way, if you already have a property, they can sort of hire you out your platform, or maybe somebody like me, I don't want that direct involvement. I just want to, provide the funding and then make it more turnkey. Can you touch on that a little bit before we wrap things up here? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. So we have 2 ways to work with HomeRoom. Specifically, is one, you have a home and it's, you're like, this could be a great roommate house, and it's a market that HomeRoom's in already. Then you could talk to us and we can get it on our platform, right? So that we do that all the time. We're doing that with 2 homes today. And the other option is, if you're interested in the model but you don't meet those criteria, we'll help you find a home. We'll underwrite it with you. We'll help with the inspection. Our construction team will look at it. We'll give you a full pro forma for the investment, and we're going to do our apps. We're going to, and it's going to be pretty good confidence that this is how it's going to play out. And we have an agent locally, we have lenders, everything. So you just come to us with the cash, we'll take you through it, it'll help you buy. And and then we'll handle the investment, we'll manage it for you. So it's all in one place. Very simple, not very much work for you to do. And agents can send investors to us and we can help their investors. And then we have kind of an agent referral program.
Nice. And I know it's pretty robust too. We were talking about that earlier. So if you're an agent listening, pay attention and go to livehomeroom.com, speak to Johnny, because what they're offering you for compensation is better than anything I've ever seen out there from other platforms and different niches, but the same industry of real estate. So this could be beneficial to you too. But so how do people, other than the website, anything else you can offer there, email, or just if they go to the website, it'll be pretty self-explanatory what to do?
Yeah. So livehomeroom.com, as you said, is our website. There's two tabs. There's invest and homeowners, and you can kind of pick from either one to schedule a call with our team. You can also email me at johnny@livehomeroom.com. Like you, Gary, I started with house hacking, pretty early, and that's how I got into real estate, investing a lot more heavily than I ever had before. And so generally just like giving people tips and tricks and like providing my thoughts if they're doing that. Because I think it's like a really cool way for someone to out of college, or even if you didn't go to college, to start your financial journey in the right direction. So
that's awesome. Yeah, one of my favorite people in the world, Diego Corso. He's from Austin. He's one of the DACA guys. He's a dreamer, and when he put himself through college, he couldn't get a valid driver's license, so he drove to work on a bike to work at General Motors, and bought his first house hacking it. Now this is now 8 years later, and he's a multi-millionaire. It's several houses, and he's doing it, man. I tell you, this is not dream. This is the real stuff that's going on. And I hope everybody listening will pay attention and take action. I mean, I know if you're driving, don't write anything down, just replay it later, take your notes then. And if you could, please listen to this one. Leave a review, man. Reviews are what make the podcast world go around. That's how we get more juice to keep going. You don't pay us for this, and so your reviews mean everything to podcasters. It's just a little inside secret of how we keep the thing going, But so do that. When you're out there leaving a review, go visit livehomeroom.com. It's just like it sounds. It's LIVE, live, home, just like your home, HOME, and room, ROOM.com. Look for Johnny or email Johnny at livehomeroom.com. And before you leave the website, go to globalinvestoragent.com. Click on a button to get help, have a conversation, totally free. You can come to class every Monday night. There's nothing to sell, nothing to buy. No recruiting, it's just straight up education. But engage and participate, especially if you're an agent, okay? So in any case, say, Johnny, thanks again, man. I really appreciate you doing this, brother.
Yeah, no, Gary, it was really awesome to be here. Cool to hear about your initial house hack with your Greek friend Socrates. And I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So everybody listen to that. We'll see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. God bless you and your families.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.